Good afternoon. I'm very pleased to be here with you this afternoon. I'd like to thank Rosie for animating it, also with her technologies. And I would like to thank also, even though Rosie did it, I would like to thank our partners, the CIOL and the ITI, for co-organizing this event with us. I'll be speaking, obviously, a little bit about the European Commission's Directorate-General of Translation, what we do to help the profession that we love so dearly. We live from it, we live for it, and we live with it, and I'm sure that even after I will no longer be living with it, it will be thriving. So I'm already challenging the title of this event. I'll be speaking a little bit very superficially and broadly about the evolution in society and why I actually don't see the translation profession as anything that needs to be very much future-proofed or anything that is particularly threatened in this world. I'll be speaking a little bit about future-proofing the people in the translation business, the translators. Okay, so just to give you, I should have,
here,
it's there, thank you.
Very modern, you see.
I'll tell you a little bit about the European Commission's Directorate-General for Translation. So we are actually in the business, we are providing translation. We are providing around 2 million pages of translation for the European Commission, the other institutions, and obviously at the end of the day, our European citizens. Our demand keeps growing. There's absolutely nothing pointing to the European Commission downgrading translation in practice. We expect this year to reach 2.2 million pages of output. Now, we work with 24 official languages into and from, so that brings us to more than 552 language combinations, and we can proudly add that we also have the now and then task to translate to and into and from non-EU languages. Just to mention a couple of examples. Chinese, we actually have 2 Chinese-speaking translators. Russian, Ukraine, to take the other end of the scale, Arabic. So we do more than the 552 language combinations. Now, with such a big translation service, we obviously have to have a lot of people in-house who are translating. So translators are the backbone of our service. We currently have 1,570 permanent translators. For many, it sounds like a horror. For most of us, it sounds like a dream, and I must say I'm very happy with every single one of them. As other public administrations, the financial crisis has made its impact, has had its impact on our service. We are quoting 10% of our positions in a frame of 5 years. We still have to do a 3% cut on our translators. We try to cut more heavily in support services to preserve as many translator positions as we possibly can. But we still have some way to go, and by 2017 we will be 1,525 translators. This does not mean that we value translation less. We will have to cope with an increasing demand with less people. I think the same trauma as everyone else in this world is facing all the time. How do we do better and more with less? We have a limited number of shorter-term contract staff, mainly to replace long-term absences so that we can keep up the speed. And then what is very important to us is our partnerships with the private sector, with the freelance sector. We outsource massively translations. Around 27% of our production is actually handled by the freelance market through companies, but also individual translators. It goes without saying that we are recruiting a whole lot of people. We need highly qualified and competent key partners. And we will now look at how are our key partners and who are they. First of all, universities. we do very much cherish getting high quality recruits. Unfortunately, one could say, others would say, luckily, education is not a competence of the European institutions. It is a member state competency, so we cannot set out any rules on what translation education should be about, and it might be just as well like that, I think. But okay, that's not the discussion for today. What we can is to support the education of translators, to support maintaining a level, to support the visibility of the profession and the work of the universities. The European Master of Translation is a project which we launched in cooperation with the universities in the EU countries in 2006, and the aim was to create a reference framework where we would set a high quality profile and specify which are the requirements that a translator should be able to fulfill, which are the competences we expect a newly graduated translator to have. And this is very important for the future-proofing of the translation. The EMT network is a network of university programs that fulfill this requirement. We have just had a new round of selection, and I'm sure we will have even more the next time around. But we currently have 62 universities who have programs, one or more programs that fulfill the requirement, and the UK can proudly provide 12 of these universities. And we are very confident that there will be even more UK universities the next time around. Another important partner, as we outsource 27% of our production, is the language industry. Here we have to be careful because we have contractual relations with the language industry. There's a limit to what we can do. We have to respect ethical requirements. We have to make sure that we don't give privileges to some, penalize others. All have to get a fair chance. But what we can do is to bring together these people. Some would call them competitors. I prefer to call them colleagues. To bring them together and to make sure that we unite our forces to provide as much information as possible online on the language industry. It is an industry which is often perceived, I think wrongly, but still which is often perceived as being under-recognized. I don't think we are as under-recognized as we think in the translation business. We have a certain modesty built in. We are not by nature very extrovert, so we think that we are just tiny small breaks in a big game. It's a partnership between GGT and the language industry, but it's also with the professional associations, which are very important for the visibility and the level of the profession, and it's the universities. The latest initiative is actually what you are witnessing today. Today we have Translating Europe workshops. Here we have the support of the Directorate-General of the Commission for Education, Art and Culture. This is a Directorate-General with somewhat more money for multilingualism policies, Erasmus Plus, for instance, also, different cultural multilingual policies, and it helps us finance it. We're trying to strengthen our roles as a catalyst, as bringing the different actors together, all in the best interest of the profession we love so much, translation. We will have a yearly conference in Brussels. I'm sure that it will be broadcasted, that there will be some webcasting of it. It takes place, I think, on 18 and 19 September this year for the first time. And we have a number of workshops like this one around in the member states. Not all member states every year, but we will have a number of member states, and I'm sure the UK will always be amongst them. Because you're really a great bunch of people here. Now, do I think we need to future-proof the profession? I do admit that we live in an ever-changing university. The translation needs are changing. It's a profession that is as old as Saint Hieronymus. He was sitting there with his scholars and translating with dusty books, and scholars would copy it, and the audience to whom the translation would travel would be limited to a handful of people, presumably. Maybe 20, but certainly not 20 million. Today, we all use translation. It has traveled through time. We've used it for trade, we've used it for diplomatic relations. Nowadays, we all use it. Governments, other public administrations, organizations, companies, the everyday citizen, and very often without realizing it. And that is the characteristic and the trauma of translation. When it is very good, it's invisible. So the better we are, the less visible we are. That's how it is, and we will have to find a way to live with that. But if you look around in your kitchen at home, you have a number of appliances. They may be produced in the UK. In that case, okay, it's natural that you get a user's guide in English. But it might also be Siemens, Bosch, or whatever, or something from France, or even from Asia. And you would be badly off if you would get a Chinese or a Korean user guide, I think, most of you at least. We take it for granted that there comes a translation with what we buy. We take it for granted that we don't have to pay for it, not visibly, at least, because of course we pay for it. But I don't have, when I use my microwave, to put in a coin, and I couldn't recommend it anyway, but I don't have to put in a coin to understand how my microwave oven is functioning. So it's a given thing today. We expect it to be free or almost free. We expect it just to be there. It falls down from heaven, and the poor translator who is sitting there in the small cyber cloud, should live for something, I guess. Okay. The shapes and forms of translation are changing. This is not the end of the world, friends. Traditional human translation still exists. Okay, St. Hieronymus might have his doubts if he saw my translators with their electronic dictionaries, with their databases, with their researches on the internet, and I don't even speak yet about the CAT tool and machine translation. He might have his doubt about the word human. But okay, we go more and more in the direction of human helping machines rather than machines helping humans, some would say. I still claim without human blood, flesh, and brain power, translations would stay poor in this world. We see it coming out to masses through crowd sourcing and community work. You have probably at least one mobile device on you. I have two. I expect when I download an app for my mobile device that it will come with some kind of interface in a language that I can understand. You may have noticed when you update apps that sometimes the update is actually because a language has been added. The poor developer does not pay a translator to translate. It's community work. It's an enthusiastic user that says, my other pals who don't understand this language should also be able to use this wonderful app. But this is not the kind of work that takes work away from our translators normally, or from the translators on the freelance market. To a large extent it does not, because it's work that would not be translated otherwise. There's no commercial interest at the end of the day that would pay for it. We can be afraid, and I'm sorry for copyright, I probably have a problem here. We can be afraid and think, oh my goodness, am I facing an alien invasion? Or we can say, is it something I should embrace? Should I, in a distant chamber of my heart, find a corner for machine translation? Should I love it? Well, it's a good question. Is it a threat or an opportunity? What is it actually that I'm facing? To me, there's nothing to be afraid of. To me, the translation technologies are equivalent to what Gutenberg was to the publication sector and to what Henry Ford was to the car production. Had it not been for Mr. Gutenberg, we would still, and the following online publication that we have today, but we would still have St. Jeromemus there with his 6 scholars who would laboriously copy what he has been translating by hand. We would not reach great masses. I very much adore Aston Martin cars and other handmade things. They are wonderful, what a nice quality. If once in a lifetime I get a chance to see one close up, I'm lucky. I cannot hope to buy one. If it would not be for Ford, we could not afford a car. It's the same with the technologies. They are bringing translation out to the populations across the world. And that's good. It's not a problem. It's an opportunity to enable gisting to everyone. It's an opportunity to build bridges across linguistic gaps in our societies. And it's an opportunity for translators to concentrate not on the boring routine tasks, but instead on the demanding intellectual and creative tasks that translators love. So it's not an enemy, it's a friend. For me, future-proofing the profession is a question of combining translation with a number of different services, that we package the things we want to sell to the world. Translation stays the backbone, is the mother planet around which we have a number of satellites and moons that will change over time what is needed. We will have to adapt, we will have to evolve, but translation will always be the backbone. There's a question of giving cultural advice, drafting support, for instance, localization, these are already old things, marketing guidance, social media branding, and it will continue. There will be new tasks in the future, and it's just about seeing the opportunities and grasping them. I will claim today that this is the profession of a lifetime. And it has to be the profession of the lifetime for us at the Commission. If I recruit young people, and I like very much young people, I used to train young people in a distant past, I can expect, unless they are caught by other challenges and want to change to another boss, I can have them around, not me, but the Commission could have them around for 30, 40 years. With the life expectations we have today, it could even become longer. If I look at my own career, I started late 80s translating for the European institutions. I was offered a choice between a pencil, a dictation machine, and a typewriter. When I showed my unsatisfaction, they said, well, you can have a typewriter which can correct not less than 20 characters backwards. Do you remember those? They are very charming. It was an Olivetti. It was the best I could offer. I came from another world at that point of time. I had my own PC. I was in the training sector. I was developing training material, exams and things, so I had to be able to work more efficiently. And some people were astonished when they heard about my PC. It was an old Amstrad. Some here might still have the grey hairs. And remember the old DOS-based Amstrad computer. And people would say to me, Gurli, you're absolutely insane. You'll never be able to fill that computer. There's so much space in it. It had a hard disk of stunning 20 megabytes. Yes. Today we get attachments of stunning more than 20 megabytes. But that was how life was. And just during my time as a translator, we traveled all the way from the pencil to the machine translation. I'm still here. I'm still following suit. Okay, I'm in the management business now, but I'm still knowing what my translators are doing. So for me, the question is not whether we have a profession of a lifetime. We do, and we must have a profession of a lifetime. My question is, which are the competences of a lifetime? Because we will have the same human flesh and blood and brain mass for a lifetime. And I will challenge now those who have thought out a lot of fancy things we need to learn at university. I will come later, because the first dot there, I say we have a number of basic professional competences, and then we have a mindset. Sometimes I almost think the second part of that equation is the more important one. The basic professional competences is everything that we want to put into the language and translation competences. It's thematic knowledge, technology mastery, all these things that we expect a translator to come with. But then we have the more general things, which will also help us develop throughout a lifetime. The ability to analyze and research is a very basic academic requirement. We have it in all educations at university level. The ability and will to learn and develop. Remember the will. We can be very capable, our minds can be top-tuned to learn something. If we don't want to learn it, it won't get there anyway. The ability and the will to change. Without these things, we can be as top educated as may be, we will not be able to follow suit with development. What are we testing? Well, you have probably heard about the European Office, the Office for Personnel Selection. We have some verbal and numerical reasoning, abstract reasoning, situational judgment. That's just to sift in people who should sit the rest of the text. The main test for us remain 2 translation tests. Why do we need to test translation when we have universities who are so perfectly well equipped to do it? Because we do not require that people who present themselves to a translation test in the European institutions have a diploma in translation. We require that they have the competences to translate. This does not mean that linguists are not better equipped to do it than others. And if we look at who get through all these tests, who are filtered into our services, an increasing majority of those are people who actually have a university education in languages and translation. We have an assessment center. And you would say, why would a translator need to go through oral tests like structured interviews, group exercises, and oral presentations? What does it have to do with translation? Well, quite a lot, actually. And it's a way to test all the basic competences that we think translators should have. Analysis and problem solving, communication, obviously, delivering quality and results, learning and development. It's very important when we recruit for a lifetime. Prioritizing and organizing work. Resilience at the workplace with less and more, and you know all this mantra, no money, less people, more work. People have to be resilient, I'm afraid. Working with others. And leadership understanding in the sense we take initiative, we take responsibility also for the group with whom we are. We have much more refined requirements in the European Master of Translation, and we can group them into 7 main groups. First and foremost, of course, the competence to provide a translation service, which is much more than just the competence to make a translation. It's very deliberate that it says provide a service. And the very first dimension that is mentioned is the interpersonal dimension. If you cannot go out and market your abilities, you will not survive out there on the market as a translator. You have to be able to interact with the world. You cannot just sit behind your computer and hope that St. Jerome will send work your way. He won't. Language competences, it goes without saying. Intercultural competences, they are actually important. Let me tell you a small example. When I first started as a translator, at the same time as I started, I was a Danish translator. There was a Danish secretary who started. He did not have to know 2 foreign languages. Secretaries have to know 1 foreign language when we recruit them. He had a very good level of Danish and a more than decent level of English. But he had to do his shopping in Belgium, where you speak French or Dutch. He badly needed a mousetrap. So he went to the biggest supermarket in the area he could find. Well-equipped supermarket, really huge. And he was looking for his mousetrap. And he didn't find it, because the first barrier he was running into was actually kind of logical, cultural barrier. The goods in that supermarket were not grouped and placed in the same patterns as he was used to seeing in Denmark. The logics of the logistics of the supermarket was different. So he didn't find his mousetrap. What he did find, as this was still in the 80s, where we had people in the supermarket. Yes, we did, actually. He did find some very service-minded staff members of that supermarket. And then he ran into his problem number 2. He didn't speak the languages. He spoke Danish and English. They didn't speak Danish. I'm not surprised. They didn't speak English either. That might be more surprising, but not if you have to master already 2 languages, perhaps. What did the guy do? He went down on his knees on the floor. He played mouse. Then he played trap. I don't really know if he succeeded in playing the cheese also. It would be surprising. But I take off my hat for the communicative competence of my friend. He got out of that supermarket with a mousetrap in his hand. I think it's swell. What would you do today? You would take your smartphone, yeah? Your iPhone or Samsung or whatever you have. Sorry, I'm not allowed to mention any smartphone. You will look up any online dictionary or any online translation program. You will put in the Danish words for mousetrap, and out come the French word. And you will show that, look, person in the supermarket, this is what I need. The only problem today is you don't find a person there, perhaps. But okay, someone else might be able to help. But this is how things are changing, and I think we just have to follow it. So the intercultural competence is actually also important. Information mining is extremely important, because you cannot expect to be translating about the same thing the whole of your life. You will have to be able to dig up thematic knowledge. We can have some thematic knowledge when we go out of university, but to be honest with you, what I learned 30 years back at university, it's not quite sufficient today. Honestly, it's not. So we have to be able to develop our knowledge, and of course we need the technological competences. This is the web with the European Master of Translation requirements. Back to closing the circle, bridging the gap, we try to support the visibility of a profession which we are very keen on seeing survive, and we are sure it will. We keep promoting and supporting the universities and through the EMT network. We interact with the language industry as much as we are allowed to. And first and foremost, what we're doing today is bringing together actors and stakeholders. So we have the university, we have the employer, and we have a small bridge between called DGT. That's the DG translation of the Commission. I thank you for your attention. Thanks.